Hi, welcome to nypost.com. Thanks for joining us for our Draft 2012 coverage of the NFL Draft here at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. I'm Michael Artsis alongside Anthony Sulla-Heffinger from the New York Post. Thanks for joining us, Anthony.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the draft a little here. No surprises really right up front. Andrew Luck goes number 1 to the Indianapolis Colts. Nobody's surprised by that, but how important is Andrew Luck going to be to this Colts team?
Well, anytime you have the first pick in the draft, you need to make sure you get a slam dunk player, and Andrew Luck certainly seems to be that way. He's the most NFL-ready quarterback coming into the league. He's got some big shoes to fill, replacing Peyton Manning in Indianapolis, but he has the skill set, he has the tools. It's just a matter of adjusting to the pro game.
Now, I saw him in the press conference after he got drafted, and he talked about knowing that he had big shoes to fill with Peyton Manning, but not trying to fill those shoes. He said that he realizes he's got a big role in the Indianapolis Colts here, but that he's not trying to replace Peyton Manning and that that's impossible. He's got a rich legacy himself. Do you think he can come in immediately and do well? Because they still do have a decent core to the team.
He's right. It's going to be impossible to replace a player of Peyton Manning's caliber. And Andrew Luck will experience some growing pains just going from Stanford to Indianapolis. The game is that much faster, but he does have a good core around him, a good set of coaches. His offensive line is mostly intact. He should have a very strong first year in the NFL.
Now, you mentioned before that the Indianapolis Colts were, bottomed out without Peyton Manning, so it will be a hard transition. They do still have a lot of players there. A lot of players are leaving, too, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck joining the team.
Yep.
Now, we move on to the Washington Redskins. No surprise there as well. Robert Griffin III is picked as their quarterback, and he seems like a good young man. In talking in the press conference, he's real excited. And this is, for Washington fans, this is something big because they haven't really had a marquee franchise quarterback in a long time for them to talk about, and they think this is their guy.
Right. Robert Griffin III is arguably the most athletic player in the draft.
He's a beast. He's a beast. He's huge. I can't even get over how big he is and how fast he runs.
His combine was phenomenal. You're talking 4.4 speed for a quarterback. And this is a big move for the Redskins. They gave up a lot to get him. They're putting everything on him. But there's no reason to think he can't succeed, and he does have big shoes to fill in his own respects because you saw the way Cam Newton came out last year, another big athletic quarterback drafted first overall. Griffin is sort of in that same mold that he's going to have to come in and set the stage, push Washington to...
Is there any part of you that says maybe the Colts should have taken Griffin instead of taking Luck?
That's the debate that's been going back and forth now for a few weeks, Luck or Griffin. The thing is, they're two different players. Luck is very athletic in his own respects, but he's more of a pocket passer. He can make plays when he rolls out, but he just doesn't have that speed that's needed for a Redskins team that's going up against Jason Pierre-Paul, Justin Tuck, and DeMarcus Ware, these beasts in the NFC East who are rushing him.
What about throwing a young quarterback to the Wolves like this? This is something that made it very hard for David Carr to have a career where, he went up against some very tough teams and spent a lot of time on the turf.
Right. Bart Hubbock actually mentioned that the David Carr effect. The thing is, these guys have to realize they are top picks in the NFL draft. They've done it their entire lives. They've performed well in college. This is just they have to go out there and play football. And I think that they'll be able to succeed.
And the Giants have had some problems with quarterbacks who scramble and can get away and still make plays. So it will be interesting to see how Robert Griffin III does here in Washington, especially in his first year. He said he's excited for his receiving corps to play with them as well.
Right. He has some talented receivers. He has a speedy guy in Santana Moss, who's a legitimate number 1 receiver. He has a big tight end in Fred Davis, who came on at the end of last year. And he has Chris Cooley, if he can come back. He has a strong group of receivers in Washington.
He said he's very excited about Chris Cooley. Moving on to the Jets, let's talk about them. They make a big splash here, I think a little unexpected. Were you surprised by their pick?
Well, I think a lot of people are caught off guard because leading up to the draft, they had mentioned they loved Courtney Upshaw, Alabama outside linebacker. And he was sitting there at number 16 when the Jets were on the clock, and they decided to go with Quinton Coples, a defensive lineman out of North Carolina. There have been some issues with Coples, but he does fit well into the Jets' defensive scheme.
Now, Coples had 10 sacks in the 2010 season. He dropped off a little bit in 2011. He switched positions. Now, he said that Rex Ryan made him do a lot of linebacker drills in the combine. He expects Rex to move him to linebacker, or at least to move him back and forth from linebacker to defensive end. A lot of defensive ends going in the draft, by the way. Mm-hmm. And he said that he expects Rex to do that, and he's happy with Rex doing that, and he feels comfortable doing that. But when he changed positions, he did struggle going into 2011. So do you see this being a problem for him?
Right. The the thing about Coples is he can play any position on the defensive line. He's played tackle. He's played the end position.
But now we're talking about linebacker.
Right. Depending on Rex Ryan's schemes, I think he can succeed as a linebacker, as a rush linebacker on the outside. I do think that there are going to be some issues in terms of learning the position, and if he has to drop into coverage as an outside linebacker or even inside, start calling plays, reading defenses, it could be a bit of a struggle, but I do think Coples can overcome them.
Now, he is compared a lot to Peppers, and Peppers, obviously, anybody would love to have another Peppers on their team. What do you think about that? He's got long arms. He's got the right build. He certainly looks a little bit like a defensive end and a linebacker combined, so it could be a really good pick by the Jets.
Right. This is another one of those things where he is linked to Peppers because of his UNC connection. And, again, it's going to be difficult to be a Julius Peppers, but if he has even 70% of that impact, he will be a great player on the Jets defense for a long time.
I'm sure the Jets hope he's not Vernon Golston. What about the Giants? They take a running back. Now, this I actually thought was a surprise move as well. The Giants usually pick the best available guy at the time. A lot of people thought that David Wilson, while he's good, is not necessarily the best player available at the time. But the Giants really need to fill the void of Brandon Jacobs, who left.
Right.
You've got a guy who's 265 pounds, runs a sub-4.5 40, and really looks like a beast. So is this a surprise pick, but something that Jerry Reese might have done an amazing job here?
It is a bit of a surprise pick just because the Giants, it's traditional for them to go with the best player available. There were a few guys who they had on their board, Stanford's Jonathan Martin or Colby Fleener, but I do like the pick because Wilson does have the speed, and it's interesting that they're bringing him in to replace Brandon Jacobs. He's run a 4.29 40 in the past, and that's lightning quick. So him and Bradshaw can complement each other really well, and it does give the Giants a two-back system because you had a few questions about the guys coming in behind Bradshaw who does have two bad feet.
Now, he was considered the fifth best running back nationally. He's also a great kick returner, had over 1,500 yards and 17 TDs in his junior year. Mm-hmm. This guy could be explosive for them and a good fit with Ahmad Bradshaw.
Right, and the thing that he can bring to the field is that opposing defenses will never have the ability to rest against the Giants' rushing attack. At any time, Bradshaw and now Wilson coming in next year as a rookie can break away a long run. I mean, Wilson last year had over 1,700 yards rushing. That's just incredible for a guy coming out of college.
Well, the Giants are going to need a lot of that rushing if Morris Claiborne, who was picked 6th by the Cowboys, can make a difference there. He's a cornerback, defensive back that the Cowboys feel they really had a void at that position and need to fill, and that made them, closer to the Super Bowl. They feel it's been a sore point for them. If he really can play well, he'll shut down the wide receiving core of the New York Giants, and they'll have to rely more on their running game, although that's going to be hard. So they trade with St. Louis, the Cowboys, to go number 6, which is a kind of a surprise move there, and they picked Morris Claiborne. What'd you think of that move?
Right. The Cowboys were eyeing the secondary throughout this entire draft, but most people had them picking Mark Barron, the safety out of Alabama. Instead, they make a big splash, move up to number 6, draft Morris Claiborne, who is the best corner in this draft. It's going to be very difficult for Giants receivers to get open against a guy of his caliber coming in. Even as a rookie, he can be a shutdown corner, have his impact felt immediately in the Cowboys' defense.
Morris Claiborne out of LSU goes to the Cowboys, number 6. They trade up for that. And then, of course, the Jets' nemesis, the Patriots, also trade up more than once to pick some really interesting draft choices here. What do you think of their picks?
Well, it's funny that we mentioned New England trading. They always trade in the NFL draft. This time, though, they trade up twice. Once to get Chandler Jones, a defensive end out of Syracuse, who's a very much like a Jason Pierre-Paul. He's got very long arms. He's a bit raw in terms of pass rushing, but he's a physical specimen, and once you mold him, he can.
See, here's the interesting thing. I think Bill Belichick really knows defense. He really knows what he's doing. There's no doubt about that. But the thing that's interesting to me is the Patriots' pass rush never seems to be an issue. And now, and last year, what seemed to be the biggest issue for them was their O-line being able to protect Tom Brady, who doesn't seem to do well under pressure, especially when you get in his face. And now they go for a defensive end. Again, a lot of defensive ends going here, but they move up to grab him. And I don't know that they needed help here, but certainly it will add to their potent defense.
Well, this is a deep draft for offensive linemen, so they can address that in later rounds. But with a player like Chandler Jones, who he is a bit of a project, but he can be an elite pass rusher in the league, and then drafting Donta Hightower later on, number 25, it's stockpiling good players who fit in the system, who can succeed at the level. Bill Belichick has his success is unparalleled.
And he likes project guys, that's for sure. Now, Hightower's from Alabama. His scouting report says he does a lot of great film study. He has great instincts. He's moved around to several positions, but he's proven to be a big threat on the field. And that's something that the Jets are going to really have to deal with now. But they do have Tebow and Sanchez to offset that.
Right. What's interesting about the Patriots selecting Hightower is that they already had two pretty good inside linebackers in Gerard Mayo and Brandon Spikes. So the Hightower pick was a little bit confusing, but still, he's a very good player. He was the anchor on an Alabama defense that was just phenomenal. He had two national championships and was the vocal leader on that defense. I mean, he's got Bill Belichick written all over him.
Who was the surprise pick of the draft? What team surprised you and said, wow, you said, wow, I can't believe they picked that guy?
Well, you have to go with the Cleveland Browns, taking Brandon Weeden, a quarterback. I mean, the thing about Weeden is this is the second time he's been drafted. He was actually drafted in 2002 by the Yankees to play baseball. And
sounds like John Elway.
Right. That didn't work out too well. But the thing is, now they had Colt McCoy already there. Brandon Weeden is a 28-year-old quarterback. He's drafted to come in and play right now. There's no sitting behind McCoy. It means Colt McCoy is out in Cleveland.
Right, and this is like bringing Kurt Warner in from, the Arena Football League and saying, he's going to be a rookie now, basically,
Right.
in the NFL. 28 is old for a quarterback. It's not really old, but it's older for a quarterback, especially starting out. How can a guy at 28 perform in the NFL, especially getting up to speed?
Well, the thing about Brandon Weeden is if you look at his numbers from the past 2 seasons, you would project him as a top 5 pick. I mean, he's thrown over 4,000 yards. Last season, he completed over 70% of his passes. I mean, this guy he can throw the ball really well. The thing about him is, again, he's 28 years old. He has to come. There's no timetable for him. There's no waiting around. He has to come in right now and succeed.
Anthony, what about the biggest winner here so far in the first round of the NFL draft? The first round is complete. 32 teams have selected, or 32 picks have been made, rather. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is the biggest winner here after the first round?
The biggest winner for me is Cincinnati Bengals. They were a surprise playoff team last year, led by Andy Dalton and A.J. Green, 2 draft picks they had from 2011. And this year they go with Alabama cornerback Dre Kirkpatrick, address a need, get a good cover corner, a guy who can come in and play immediately. And then with their next pick, they don't make a flashy move, but they get offensive lineman Kevin Zeitler out of Wisconsin, who led one of the best rushing attacks in the nation alongside Peter Kahns. I mean, this guy he's not a flashy pick, but it's a pick that will help the franchise down the road.
So could you see this team being good now for several years to come, but also be kind of a sleeper for this year? Again, they were a sleeper last year. Maybe people underestimate them, and they'll be able to move up if these guys can fit in and play well quickly?
Absolutely. I think Cincinnati, they're going to continue to build on what was a successful season last year, making the playoffs with a rookie quarterback, and they're building something there.
Well, it will be interesting to see what happens. Roger Goodell said this is the start of the NFL season, and he's right. So we're here at the draft. You got to follow all the NFL draft coverage in nypost.com. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be on nypost.com all weekend with all sorts of draft coverage, blogging, articles. You got to read all the writers and everything. Anthony Sulla-Heffinger, thank you so much for joining us from nypost.com.